Thank you. It's good to be here. So I'll just start in then, and I would ask people to think about questions after I've presented. Kind of allow me to flow through and cover off some things. So what I really want to focus on is that these days a lot of people tend to be able to, recite and refer and discuss and point to the history of what's happened and where things are at now. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing is a lot of especially young individuals who have, been through university or different courses, Native studies, things like that. And they are very much trying to apply their, I'll put it this way, Western training to dictate and basically say, follow me, I know what to do, in terms of how to protect and deal with governance and things of that nature. But unfortunately, their toolkit is very much, non-Indigenous. It's more than just words. It's a mindset. And unfortunately, a lot of those who are accepted into university, not always, but there's almost been a historical preference that it be people who are detached from communities. I mean, I know of many women especially, very knowledgeable about treaties, for example, and nationhood and all these sorts of things. Not that they learned that at school. They've been brought up with that. They carry knowledge that's been given them. Well, that comes out pretty quickly, and a lot of them have been rejected for admission because the emphasis in our Canadian educational system has been to remove any concepts or reference to original allodial underlying title remaining in the nations, to teach a form of treaty that's redefined as a domestic agreement. And so while these young people come out and they're very caring, obviously, they have great intentions, they want to fix things, but in their in their drive to do this, they're also, of course, building their careers. And first and foremost, what's missing in this picture is one, who are you? Knowing who you are. Are you still nationals of a nation? Owning, and I use the term own in the concept of Indigenous law, which is very different than ownership under Western principles of law. But nonetheless, it is ownership. And I use that terminology because the world needs to understand this isn't just you occupying and using land. This is your land. And so the concept of ownership is very, very important to use to communicate this to the world. So first and foremost, who are you before you start doing? And if you're coming from a perspective, if those who are advising and drafting and organizing and doing workshops fail to appreciate that they are viewing things from a different perspective, their solutions, their kits, their how they go about things is very much non-native, if you will, then you're going to end up having trouble. A lot of people are thinking, okay, well, we gotta write our own laws. We gotta do our own laws. Well, fine, but where are those laws being positioned? Under what? Most that I'm seeing, individual communities or bands are calling themselves standalone nations. Well, that is not the definition of a nation. And those standalone communities didn't even exist at time of treaties at times, and are not what's referenced in treaties. You'll see the names, even though they're English interpretations sometimes, they're not the same, they're not describing you in your own language at times. Nonetheless, it's that what I call big N nation. It's not just a pocket of people. To preserve your ownership of underlying title, you need to always make that connection to the broader picture, your entire country, not just where you live, not just where you work, where you hunt. It's the entire area. So first and foremost then, who are you? What do you have? And then how do you use it? And it's not enough with respect to just have someone drafting a law, because it's certainly not good to be using the templates that come from Canada and just filling in the name of the community, which is often what happens. Because all of the language in there is all geared to, yes, you may have been part of a former nation, but you are now an Indian Act band only, basically. And you're seeing litigation out there. So when individual communities are doing this work, and that is, of course, where it can start most effectively, you can't just ignore what else is going on, because pleadings have been filed in court that say these are the facts. That's a public evidentiary basis. Settlement agreements are entered into, loaded with language which says the same thing. Like, for instance, with the R.H. Robinson Huron 1850 treaty settlement and the pleadings, it's all in there that the nation's gone. The Anishinaabe are basically gone. The only thing surviving today are Indian Act bands, whereby the chiefs are the sole decision makers for the people. How did they get that? Well, there was probably a membership election code, other sorts of codes passed by the people, not knowing there's sentences in there delegating their powers to the chief. And so very much there is, and the focus for people is like, you can only do what you can control. And in every community there are a finite number of people who truly know with respect who they are, what they have, and carry knowledge or have the ability to access knowledge. I sent an email providing a link for Switlo Sheds the Light YouTube episode that I did, Your Sacred Song. Talks about the fact that people are very good at calling in the ancestors to be present in their circle. But the ancestors can't really help until you actually initiate that process. And that process is initiated by your songs. You call them in, they're present, they're waiting, but they won't interfere. They can't initiate and start themselves. So to get that memory flowing, to get that direction and guidance going for the work that's done to preserve your nation and your lands and your resources and to protect all your relations, what's critical is remembering the songs. Now, some of those songs, the memory of it in total may have been lost. Doesn't matter. It's important to start. And this is where the focus on language is most critical. Not the goal of we can conduct all our business instead of English or French, we can conduct it in our language. To be realistic, it's very hard for people to learn languages later in life. If you want to pass on a language, you need to be starting that in vitro speaking, and at age 2, the baby will start to close off its recognition of sounds that relate to language especially. So it's a very early start, and it's been proven that it's very hard for adults. So despite the best intentions and workshops and apps and language use and all that type of work, the fact is it's not going to get to a critical mass at this point. Residential schools did a real number, right? So focus on the songs. Focus on a song. So when there's a prayer and welcoming the ancestors and such, and whether it's a pipe, however it is done, it's also important to add to that how to call them in to actually work with you. Not just be present to watch and observe and protect, but to actually work with you. So focus on that language work, focus on a song, focus on sharing that. That's much easier. And of course, they can't be interpreted. It doesn't work translating your song into English or French. That doesn't do it. You need the original language. So critical to focus on that. And as I said, you can't stop what's going on. There's lots of money being thrown at things. There are a lot of chiefs that feel this is what I have to do to provide for my people. There are other chiefs that just want the money. There's lawyers that are getting very, very rich, and they're not actually protecting, and they don't have to. The way the law societies are set up, all they have to do is receive instructions from the chiefs. That's all they have to do. And when the chiefs appoint a litigation committee, they only have to accept instructions from those few people. So there's nothing in any of that that says they have to think about, am I destroying a nation? They don't care. They don't have to care. You don't see me doing that kind of work, although I could have, the kind of money I could have had. I could never do that. Because why? I know. I've been brought in, I've seen. So think of it that way. If a white person like me can be brought in and taught and given knowledge of laws and nationhood and how things are and done, all the more so your ability to connect and to start that and enforce that. Not to overwhelm everyone, like, well, you don't speak our language, so you can't be involved. Well, some that do speak your language are the worst ones that are selling you out, so to speak, now. And they use that to manipulate and control. And people think, oh, well, they must know, they know the language. Know the song. Use the song. You'll get the help that you need. It's not going to come from a book. It's going to wake you up in the middle of the night, and it's going to say, I need to do this now. You might not know why, but you'll do it. So the work then, it's not enough just to say, well, I can't, they're doing it anyhow, what can I do? There's a lot. There's a few levels. Sometimes you do have chief and council who are opposing what's being done, but they're outnumbered by the other chiefs or other chiefs and councils in the picture. They can actually do things in terms of, for instance, because it's all about documenting your evidence. What is happening here in this time? If you do nothing, the only thing that speaks for you are these settlement agreements, the cows and plows, the specific claims settlements, the litigation settlements. That's all in the public record, and that's what Canada relies on and will rely on to say, yeah, sometime around this time, 2025 or so, they're dead and gone. And by their own admission, look what their lawyers said. They put it on the public record. Look what they signed off on. They all agree. There's no more Anishinaabe Nation. There's only Indian Act bands that are controlled and run by the chiefs. And so the chiefs decide everything. For Anishinaabe, this is going to, after the Robinson-Huron Treaty settlement, this is going to get very, very real. Not only is it about land that was lost there, but they're going after the final package, if you will, of everything, so that they will establish municipal law run by the chiefs' structures that they set up. Not even the chiefs will be involved at that point. It'll be simply the structure that's in place. Now, I use the term domestic law, meaning Canadian domestic law, but a lot of people talk about municipal. Well, municipal and domestic are interchangeable. In the international arena, they speak of municipal law being local laws in the state. So the point is that all the work that is being done to, people talk about having a land law, people talk about having different kinds of laws that they want to connect with their original laws. But if you park it under a municipal structure or framework, then it's nothing more than that. It's not your law. Someone might call it Anishinaabe law, but it's not. It's not at all. It's completely Canadian municipal law that is not going to protect you in any other arena. And it's something that Canada can always interfere with in a very legal way. Presently, Canada cannot legally interfere with your law. You're still a nation. Now, are you still a nation? That's the key. Right now, with the Robinson-Huron Treaty settlement and pleadings, says you're not a nation. So that's why I crafted two important documents in that scenario. One is confirming who you are. It's a 2-pager, I believe. Confirming who you are, no matter what's going on, and it covers off. I don't care who's talking about us, says they speak for us. They don't. We're still here. We're not terminated. 2 pages simply, and you just keep using them. Then addressing in particular anything that's settled, for example, where you're ultimately getting some distribution or some gift from chief and council. It's a gift, it's not entitlement when there's not a class action. So upon receiving, after you receive it, identifying and being clear on what basis this money's coming to you. Because you were not part of the litigation. It wasn't a class action. You were not part of the discussions. You didn't even give permission for this to go forward in the first place. And on the basis, you didn't approve these statements saying nation's dead. That the only thing is Indian Act. Like you talk to the majority of people, they would say that's ridiculous. Well, that's what's all over this thing. In exchange for a few dollars that is not really going to trickle down much. It's going to support the lawyers and the new governance structure to function. So you'll have a few well-paid individuals, and I don't see how it benefits the people ultimately in the long run. There might be a little splurge, money gets sent, and the people buy a new truck or have some holidays and have a little fun. It's understandable, but it's not really going to change anything long term. But what's the cost of all that is without doing something, without saying clearly, nation's still alive, still our land. Nice try, everyone. We know you got a lot of money out of it, but nice try, you didn't do us in. It doesn't matter what you get in terms of a form of a release. It doesn't matter what you force me to sign in order to get money that's being given out. It doesn't matter at all. It matters my intent. Why, on what basis is this money owed to me? It's owed by the Crown. It's coming to me. It's only partial settlement, partial payment. You can't change a treaty by domestic document. You cannot change a treaty through a court decision. You cannot change a treaty without proper protocol. But of course, by saying the nation is gone, and the only thing that remains is an Indian Act band run by chief, well, you're also saying the treaties are gone, because only the nations have treaties, not Indian Act bands. So that's a backdoor way, if you will, of destroying the treaties. And that doesn't just change the treaties, that destroys them. They're no longer in effect. They're truly historical, as Canada has been preparing everybody to speak of them, and lawyers speak of that too. But you can prevent that. You don't need hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't need a lawyer who doesn't know who you are. You don't need technicians who don't know who you are. You can do this with a few templates that I'm, contributing to help people. That says, again, the basic front statement, no, we're still here. And secondly, if some money's come to me and it's because of a claim, for instance, cows and plows, says the specific claim says, okay, no more entitlement whatsoever. Excuse me, read the treaties. It's whenever a family decides to farm. Whether they're farming 100 or 200 years from now, if one of your families say, I want to put a greenhouse, I am entitled to get all this stuff to help me do that. Not, oh, because a relative of mine 150 years ago, 20 years ago, received a part of a settlement that went to the band council, that went to the band, not the people. The chief and council file specific claims. The chief and council are entitled to the payment. If they decide to gift you, that's their business, but they don't have to. And they'll gift it for political reasons, keep people happy, here's a little, But that is not recognizing your entitlements as a nation with treaties with the Crown. It's got nothing to do with that at all. So it's so important to remind and not let these documents speak for you, to say we're still here. This is who we are. We have all this stuff. We have treaties. We have things are owed to us and will continue to be owed to us. And I put this to you, that often when it comes to treaties and relations with the Crown, there's talk about as long as the grass grows, the waters flow, sun shines, things like that. This is supposed to be a permanent developing relationship. Not only is the Crown breaking that, but those who speak for you when your silence says, yeah, they can, those who speak for you are also breaking the treaty. What then happens with the water, the grass, the sun? Things are not going to be in balance at the very least. And we're getting very close. I mean, on the spiritual side of things, it's all blasphemous, if you will, to be engaging in this. You can't stop it. You may not have the majority to change chief and council. Even if you did have the majority and you do change chief and council, they're often beholden to the advisors and lawyers because they don't know this stuff. And they sit there in a room with a lawyer who's looks like them and they sound intelligent and know more than they. And so they just, you know what? Everyone is being conditioned to just do as they're told. It's no different if it's an Indian agent, or if it is a lawyer who looks like you, or it's your brother or sister or husband even. That is not the way of surviving and thriving. You are here after so many thousands of years. Think about that. There is no other area of the world where those societies, those people still exist, those nations still exist. So it doesn't, I don't want people thinking about, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that, what can I do? It's overwhelming. Just say so. So what? There's no power in any of that unless you give it power. If you allow it to overwhelm you and you give into it, then it becomes the reality, and that becomes the limits of your law. You're under Canada. And you have no more decision making. It's only who you elect once every how many years. So how do you do this work? Like I said, you take care of the things that are going on. So either one or all of this sort of thing, the chief and council may be able to do a statement that says, yeah, we're entering into this. We feel money is owed to us for these reasons. We acknowledge that this cannot change our nationhood. This doesn't destroy our, everything that counters the kinds of things they're signing off on. They're not saying I'm signing this under duress. They're just pointing out what's not enforceable, what does not change them, that we are still here. This was our intention of entering into this. Our people are being starved. Our people have great needs. We needed money to service. This is us mitigating what the damage that continues to be done to us, the continuing efforts to conquer, to colonize us, to get us to abandon. We entered into this as a mitigating factor so we could get some money in to try to help our people. We did not intend this to say we're abandoning who we are, no matter what's written in there. We did not abandon. We acknowledge our nationhood. We acknowledge that we are subject to our laws. So you can also do a step, for instance, that has chief and council upon being nominated and as well as being elected, where they acknowledge the nation exists, the law continues, they are subject to it. And so that's a nice little piece. Again, a couple of paragraphs. Doesn't have to be a big dissertation or something that I would write or could speak on. Very simple stuff. It's evidence. It says that what that little 2 paragraphs might do then is be able to, 100 years from now, that can be held up and said, yeah, that chief, he signed, when he was chief, he signed that. But look at the limits of his authority. He acknowledged his authority is limited by the fact that we're a continuing nation with our continuing laws. So he can't do more. He couldn't do those things. He could not kill our nation off just because he signed an agreement. Clearly the intention, as was shown in this BCR, the intention was to mitigate. Canada positioned us under poverty and all the sorts of things that was done to control and contain you. So of course this was entered into, but it doesn't give Canada what it was trying to get. The law doesn't work that way. So there's that kind of piece. There's the piece that says we're individuals can sign in terms of we're still here as a nation. None of this stuff speaks for us. We never gave this authority. The other piece is upon receiving a gift that comes from a distribution of a settlement. on what terms you're receiving that. And that document is out at your way. There's a number of people that have it. And then let's get to the work that is being done in terms of governance. You may have someone who you feel is a good helper, but there has to be a critical eye on it, what's written, because generally speaking, the language in there can be very deadly. It doesn't take much for someone like myself, for instance, to be able to go through that and say, okay, don't need this, keep it simple. Here's what needs to be added, a couple of lines here and there. And now you've got a working document that's different than what Canada's hoping you'll put in place. Canada and the lawyers are trained to do it a certain way, which creates municipal law. What I'm saying is, if you want to preserve nationhood and with that, law of the land, well, it's who owns the land. You abandon the land, you don't own it anymore, it's not under your authority, and especially if there's no more nation, well, the land then falls to the next in line, which are the permissions given to the Crown by the nations, usually by treaty. So that positioning of it, and what tends to happen is there's all this nice language, usually in your local language, your language, that says, oh, we're, all this nice stuff. So one page. So people look at that and say, oh, wow, they must know what they're doing, because look what they just wrote. But the problem is, that's just a tacked on one page. Nobody's gone through the whole document that originated from the feds that says, well, that might have been, but, so what? This is now. So it's a matter of working through the template that you may have been provided, or whatever the lawyer has done in 10 other bands and is giving you, and just wants to fill in your name and charge you the same amount over for work that was already done. There needs to be a critical eye on that, or is going to start building up the evidence that says, no, you're just a municipal entity within Canada. And that means, how do you prove you never abandoned and gave up your land and your entitlements and your nationhood? Because those documents are speaking for you. And then if they get put to a vote, it's like, well, the whole community agreed with this. And the community, with respect, is not in a position to be able to understand the dangers here. A simple vote, that's individuals acting in their own capacity. What's missing are the circles where the ancestors are called in, where they're asked through this song to participate and guide. And it's the sharing of the thoughts, not just whoever drafted it, whoever the texts or lawyers are, but the people talking about that. And more importantly, it's going to be more than just talk. It's going to be the feeling. It's going to be the thought that comes into mind. That's an ancestor helping. That isn't stifled, but rather is shared. Look, I just had this sense that there's something wrong with this area. Okay, let's get someone who might have had more experience dealing with that. Let's have them take a look at this and see what information or what sense or feeling they have about it. But bring it back to the circle. This takes time, sure. But guess what's happening in the meantime? You're actually building your connections. The Western way is a very individual way. It's a way of being. It's a pick me to follow, I know what to do, and you pick and choose who does what. You're not doing together. So the work needs to be done together. Even though it might start with one or two or a few people, it needs to go through these processes. And not everyone, you're not going to have the largest circle to begin with, because a lot of people don't have the capacity right now. They may not be well. But they might sit and watch. And if they're in that room, they're getting something, especially if the ancestors have been called in and they've been asked to participate. There are gifts, there's things shared that they will soak up, if you will. First and foremost, you cannot forget who you are. You cannot forget what you have. And then learning, relearning how to use it respectfully, calling upon the protocols, calling for the help of those who knew what to do so that you're here today. This is not the first time in history that you're under attack. A lot of people think, oh, we got this nice reconciliation thing. Everyone's talking that. Everyone's wearing orange shirts. Everyone's saying we appreciate the land we're on. They all think that's it. It's all done. That's just, pretty little packaging. What's underneath all that is getting you to do yourselves in, and getting lawyers in and leaders to do you in. Whether they understand that or not, whether they intend to do that or not, the fact is the words will speak for everyone who are no longer here. And that's when things are going to get really tough for your grandchildren. Because if they have not been able to assimilate and get careers and push through the racism and systemic racism, that abandoning and giving up simply says, yeah, see, all along we were right. We were better. We're stronger. We were more entitled. We were always entitled to have this land because, you weren't good enough for it. God made a mistake putting you here on this land, and God has driven us to come here and take over from you. Those sorts of things are not conducive to respect. And a relationship, more than anything, is based on mutual respect. So, as I said, there's a number of steps, and I can do up a sort of a briefing on this, if desired, and I can send that to you, that can be distributed. But it's this simple concept. I want to ensure that not everything has to be done over and over and over again. Move forward together, but together is not isolated in contained areas. Moving forward is necessary as a nation. And even if it's only a handful or one or two people from each community, getting together and doing the protective work. And then the biggest thing is, where do you preserve this so that people will have access to this? Because when someone tries to do something, say, okay, we can now kick you off. We want to mine this whole area, and it's not safe for you to be here. So, yeah, we know you had a land claim. We know you had, this, but under Section 35, we're entitled to push you off if there's a meaningful economic and national objective, and that is we can make some money. And resources and water. I mean, you name it, they will just push you aside. And in fact, some of the old, very old elders, now ancestors for decades ago now, used to warn about this stuff, and people would think they're kind of crazy, just demented. But they might not have the language and tools and words that I have to convey it, but they're absolutely correct. I remember one old guy, he was like 96 when I was first introduced to him. And he was like the elder's elder. And they just really, the younger people were just, and of course he's repeating himself because he's trying to get through. He's trying to get this important message carried on. So what happens? It gets carried on through me, because somehow I've been directed there to be present, and I hear him, and I want to know more, and I'm told. So I carry that so that I can repeat it when people are ready, or I can do the protective work when there doesn't seem to be anyone else around. And in doing all of that, it's important not to do it from a good place always, right? The fundamental law. Even if your chief has signed off on something, and even if it's literally deadly, don't focus energy on hating the chief. Don't focus energy on, we got to get rid of the chief, or whatever, That's the wrong, if you will, exercise. It's just going to divert your energies, get you upset, bring in the wrong kind of, I don't have the words for all this stuff. You're going to bring the wrong sorts of things in that's going to take you off course even worse. Focus on what needs to be done, what is within your control. You're not going to, politics in a band council situation is not the most productive right now. If you're not in the right family, you're not going to probably be able to change that no matter how much you work. But if you're able to communicate with people, find like-minded people to say, okay, we have an idea, we don't know all the details, but we know there's these 6 things going on right now, whether they're signing it with industry, with companies, with provinces, with Canada. We know this stuff's going on. We don't know the details of it. We don't have to. We don't have to. If we can, if more details we happen to come across easily, not devoting a life to it, the better, great. So what now do we need to put in place? We can put 2 pages here, a 1 page here. We can distribute this there. We can encourage people to say, okay, make your own copy. Send it in. Make sure there's some proof that you sent it in. So email's not always the best, you know. And then where do we preserve this? Where are our archives for our next generations to say, no way. When there's some court case saying, hey, you can't move us, and Canada's saying, well, yeah, we can. Section 35, you signed all these deals. It's all Section 35 worded and loaded. We can do this under this doctrine. Then it's like, no, hold on. That is not what went down. Yes, you made our chiefs at that time sign these things. Look at our situation. You made us have poor health. You made us have no housing and no water and all this. That's all ours. You put us in these circumstances. That does not mean that you killed us, because guess what? The Crown cannot kill you. They can set the stage for you to want to leave, abandon, be rid of it. Just like medically assisted death now that's, you know, allowed in Canada. You'll see a lot of disabled people who are choosing to do that because what are they going to do? Live on the street? They can't afford rent. They can't access the mental health things they need. So they're being offered vets and stuff like that too. Oh, do you want some information on medically assisted death? Maybe this is your solution. Just the nations will continue to exist, and people will do their best to remind and carry that knowledge forward. It doesn't have to be university level dissertations. There's some key language that's necessary, of course, to counter the evidence that Canada will present. But ultimately, your words are so powerful. Your words connect with so many thousands of years of words and ancestors and generations to come. The power of that.
Yeah. You got 5 minutes.
Yep.
This is a 5-minute warning.
Thanks.
Okay?
Yeah, so it's important to know this work does not, you don't need to find someone to do the work for you. Everyone can be involved who wants to be involved, who feels a sense of, I need to protect my nationhood, I need to protect my people, my land, and I want to do this. And that really is the focus. Where you park this work. Lots of stuff's being done. People are encouraged. Okay, and there's people running around and saying, okay, let's do this for education. Let's do this for child and family welfare and things like that and services. All of that stuff, especially the child and family services, all of it is saying, okay, we're now under provincial. We're now just a municipal entity. Well, all municipalities flow under the provinces. So these things that are happening, you don't need to know the details. All you need to know is, okay, I'm going to put in place evidence to counter what is being done here. And it does, if you want to add to it, to have kind of a legalistic detail, I've done this for people and for band councils actually, that, you know, okay, here's what's wrong with this picture. We disagree with this, we disagree with that. Here's why we're doing it, but nonetheless, this is the only option open to us. We need to provide these services. There is no other way to do it, so we're doing this to mitigate. There's so many different ways that this can be done, formally, informally, in great detail, in a couple paragraphs. So it all comes down to, again, knowing who you are, always linking to that, and not just getting lost in the work that has been created, if you will, deflecting you. Like, there's a time where none of this was a worry for Canada. But, I've been at 30 plus years talking about, hey, I know these nations are alive. I know their laws. I know they exist. And very common, easy international law that states this is what's what. So not enough just, because you can't refute that. It's that basic. So getting in place the evidence that says, yeah, well, that was then, this is now. We left that behind because we wanted to be legal wards of Canada. And that's a whole other discussion that comes from UNIDRIP and such. So I hope that gives you some direction on how to approach the work on governance and true self-governance and protecting from all the stuff that's happening. You can do it. Don't be overwhelmed. It's not hard. First and foremost, remember those songs. Well, yeah, and the important thing to realize is it's not about going backwards, going back. It's about, throughout time, surviving nations and societies do so through adaptation. They adapt to the changes in the environment. But adaptation is not killing yourselves off. It's not assimilation. It's not reconciliation. It's adapting and bringing in what changes to your laws or what new processes you need to use that continues on. Because your laws are not frozen in time. They, again, adapt to as your needs change and as you respond to the environment around you. And the environment around you includes other people that are in the area. And that includes, of course, the relationship with the Crown. So it's about moving forward, carrying with you that whole grand body of knowledge and laws. And of course, the land and resources that are your responsibilities. And carrying it and moving forward. Not going back and trying to do it how it was done 1,000 years ago. Not going to be possible. But those who were doing 1,000 years ago, they can be in your circle and they can help guide you. And like I said, it's experiences that many of you have. Others, this sounds like gobbledygook to you. It's not something you're going to learn at university, although you may be in university and have a dream one night and say, oh, okay, we're learning about this in this lecture and this part of the subject area. What's wrong with this picture? And there might be a little reminder that comes in to shake that student up a bit to say, don't just swallow this. There's more to this. Or there'll be some terms or something that directs them that later on in their life, it'll come to mind. They'll say, oh, that's what that was about. These are the ways these things happen. So that knowledge will be shared even though you can't see them presently. That's how powerful your stuff is. And that's what's so wonderful about it that I have not seen in other, you don't see that in, Canadian stuff, for instance.